Hello and welcome to the long-awaited iPod Nano 3rd Gen Ultimate Repair Guide. Now the one tricky thing with this model is removing that rear housing and then getting it back on at the end as well, as it's got a similar design to the classic 6th and 7th gens. Both the front plate and the rear housing are made from metal, which means it's quite hard to get in between them and undo those clips. And it also makes it quite easy to scratch up as well, especially if you slip with the metal tool there. So yeah, in order to open it up, what you want to do is get a double box cutter blade and get in between the front plate and the rear housing in order to undo those clips. Here's a picture showing exactly where the clips are, which can be used as a template so you know where to pry as well. You want to start over near the headphone jack, as that section's the weakest, and then work your way up that whole side. Then coming over to the other side and repeating the process there again as well, going from top to bottom, and then along the top as well. Yeah, you're probably going to have to bend those clips slightly in order to actually get it off, unfortunately as well. And that's the most annoying thing about this repair. It's quite difficult to get the iPod to look the same after it's been fixed, just due to how it's constructed. Although stay tuned to the end of the video to see how I reassemble it. And yeah, you do want to use a box cutter blade here as well, as the end's much thinner than those metal pry tools, which just makes it a lot easier to get it in there. Also, the metal pry tools, they're just a lot more bendable and they often just warp on you and just bend really easily, making them much less effective when trying to get in here. And you're just not going to get anywhere with the plastic tools as well, unfortunately, because they're not strong enough in this case. But yeah, it is quite a tedious process to get this back off. It can take quite a while. So I won't speed up the video so you can just copy exactly what I do. And yeah. But yeah, fortunately once we do have the back off, it becomes really easy to fix. In order to remove that logic board, all you have to do is undo those 6 screws at the bottom. They're all different sizes as well, so I would recommend getting one of those magnetic mats or a parts tray or something like that just to separate them. After those are out, we can lift up the headphone jack and remove that little metal piece as well that's in there. And don't lose that either, because it contains some clips for the rear housing, and if we don't put that back in, the housing might not attach properly. Then after that, just undo that connector holding in the button flex as well and remove that as well. Then carefully fold open the whole assembly like a book and disconnect the LCD. You need to be careful here, as it's pretty easy to overlook and accidentally rip that LCD flex there, so yeah, just watch out for that. And now that we have that logic board out, it's a good time to inspect it for any water damage or corrosion or anything like that that could be causing any issues. So to replace the old battery, first we just unstick it from the metal back there, and it's just held on with some weak adhesive, so yeah, you just pull it straight up pretty much. Then hold your soldering iron over the pads while you remove the battery, and just pull on it ever so slightly and it'll just come out. Don't pull it too hard because you can rip the pads off of the PCB there, so yeah, you want to avoid that obviously. Before we put in the new battery, we just need to clean up the black stuff by scraping it off with tweezers. Then add some flux to the area and apply some new leaded solder to each of the pads. Now taking our new battery and inserting each wire as I do in the video, the white ones go at the top, red in the middle and black at the bottom. Now when I do this, I usually use a microscope, as I do have one, although it's a little overkill for this, but I would recommend at least getting a magnifying glass, or maybe one of those helping hands tools with a magnifying glass, as these wires are quite small and it does make it a lot easier. So now stick the battery back into place and position those wires so that they won't interfere when we reassemble the device. After those wires are in, you can flip the logic board around and cut the leads using your pliers if the wires are too long. Then folding them over again, just using the soldering iron so they're down nice and flat and they won't make contact with the metal housing there. And now just give that area a spray with the isopropyl alcohol and wipe it up with a cotton bud or something like that. And yeah, if you got a broken LCD or a cracked front plastic or something like that, now's a good time to replace that as well. So you can remove both of those just by pushing them out of the front of that metal housing there, and they just come straight out like that. And yeah, they'll come out as one piece as well, so you can separate them just using a box cutter blade. And you'll probably, after you separate them, you'll probably have to give them a wipe down with some alcohol as well before reinstalling them, as they'll get pretty dirty just from all the adhesive and stuff. And if your LCD is broken as well and you've got a replacement, most likely it didn't come with the front plastic, so you'll have to reuse your front plastic there as well. Yeah, and you don't have to re-adhere them together like they were originally, just because they sit naturally in the correct position, so you don't have to worry about that. And yeah, just putting those back together. Now, another common issue with this model is that the buttons can stop clicking, and if that's the case, you can fix it just by cleaning the pads. You could get another touch wheel if you really wanted to, but it's not necessary, as you can just do it much easier for free just by giving them a little clean here. So yeah, as these buttons are just a flex cable with like a pad and a metal dome over the top, a layer of corrosion can form in between those two layers, which prevents the button from clicking. And yeah, you can fix it just by scraping away that layer of corrosion there. This is the same as many of the other iPod models as well. If you've seen my previous videos, I've done this repair in the past. So yeah, to remove the buttons, you can just use some heat and alcohol to weaken the adhesive holding that metal piece, and using your tweezers, get in between the middle there and pry it up. Once it's out, you can just remove the buttons flex like this, and be careful of that chip on the corner of the flex when you're doing that, because yeah, you don't want to break it or anything. Then we can just peel up each pad and use a combination of scraping with the tweezers and rubbing with 100% isopropyl alcohol on the end of the cotton bud, and then just repeat that process for all the buttons. Because if one button's got corrosion, then it's likely that a lot of them have it. Yeah, so just do it for all of them, even if it is still working. So yeah. And now, I saw some comments in a previous video where people were taking issue with the tweezers and alcohol to remove the corrosion. But I can tell you, I've never had any issues doing that in the past, and that's actually a pretty common way of cleaning these. Like, I didn't make that up myself. Heaps of people online recommend that's how you do it. And at this stage, I've done that hundreds of times over the past 5 years now, and never have I had any issues with them after cleaning them, so it's not going to cause any damage or anything like that to the dome or the contact pad. There may at one stage have been a coating of some sort from the factory to slow down that corrosion possibly, but I'm not 100% sure about that. But if there was, that layer is long gone now, if it's not actually making contact and it has gotten to the point where it's actually corroding. So yeah. Someone said you could just use a standard pencil eraser to remove it, and I've looked that up and that does seem like that would work too, although you do still need to use the alcohol as well. Or you could get some of that contact pad specific cleaner, but most likely that stuff is just isopropyl alcohol with a different sticker on the bottle at 3 times the price anyways. So yeah, the alcohol is the most important thing here. The tweezers are just to get the big chunks off. So I guess if you're worried about using the tweezers for whatever reason, you could give that a skip, but just don't complain to me when it doesn't work after you spent an hour on your device, because I am 100% recommending that you use tweezers and alcohol, because I know that's what works. So yeah. Now to reassemble it, just put the button flex back onto that metal piece, then stick that down to the frame, and you won't have to reapply adhesive to that as well, because the one from the factory is still sticky enough. So yeah, just put that back together. Now take your logic board assembly and reinstall that LCD flex and just push that into position, and realign the logic board back into the frame, and make sure you get the lock switch lined up as well at the bottom there. And reinstalling the click wheel flex and putting that back in. And now putting those 6 screws back in. Yeah, and make sure you put that metal piece back in there next to the headphone jack as well. Now that we've got all that back together, it's time to test it and make sure everything works before we reassemble the iPod. So test the headphone jack, the buttons, the lock switch, your new battery, and that it connects to iTunes and everything. Because we don't want to have to fiddle around with the rear housing once we get it back on. And yeah, once you're happy with it, now it's time for the final stage of reattaching that rear housing. Now, if we were to just try and stick back that housing on as it is, we would probably have a massive gap around the sides, if we could even get it back on at all. So we have a couple of ways going about it in order to get it back on and trying to avoid that big gap there. The best looking method is to just straight up buy a replacement rear housing, which you can probably find on AliExpress or eBay or something like that. That'll look the best, but it's obviously the most expensive, and most of us just aren't looking to sink all that much money into restoring an iPod Nano 3. So yeah, I usually don't do this, but if you want it to look new again, you could do that if you wanted. Another method I saw from another iPod seller, you can rip off all of those metal tabs and just glue it on. And that works pretty well, to be honest. You can get it back to where there's no visible gap around the outside. So if you want to do that, just make sure you use one of those soft and rubbery drying super glues like B7000 and put some all the way around the edge of the iPod and the rear housing as well. Yeah, then just adhere it down. You probably want to use either a clamp or a rubber band to hold the iPod together while the glue dries as well. And I'd let it sit for a day or two and just make sure it's all good. Then just scrape off any of the glue that overflowed, and yeah, just don't use one of those hard drying super glues, I guess, as you won't be able to open it again if you do. So yeah. And number 3, which is my favorite method, which is just bending back those metal tabs as best you can and just reinstalling it. There can still be a small gap when you do it that way, but I think it looks the best that way, and you can still open it up easily in the future if you ever needed to open it up again. Just bend the clips back using those flathead tweezers there, and then push them down and in as I do in the video, then reinstall it. Start by inserting tabs at the top, then down the side, then lastly the other side with the headphone jack, and you might hear a little click after each tab reconnects. Also, with the last tab near the headphone jack, the clip can sometimes go in the front of the tab, so you can just use your tweezers to push it back in, and you know what I'm talking about if that's happened to you. And as you can see, there's still a small gap around the outside, and you can tell it's been opened, although it's not that bad. And now that that's done, just give the iPod a wipe down with isopropyl alcohol, and it's ready for a new life. There you go, we're done. And yeah, thanks for watching my little tutorial here. Hopefully you're able to get your iPod working again. I've got a bunch of these tutorials out now for a bunch of the other iPod models, and I'll plan to release one for every single iPod model into the future as well, so subscribe for that. Also, follow me on TikTok. I've been uploading heaps more videos there, and I think my TikToks are much better than my YouTube videos, to be honest. So yeah, if you want to follow me there instead for more iPod content, go ahead. I'll leave the link in the description. I'm also offering, well, I've launched a new website now with a bunch of iPods for sale, iPod parts as well, and I've also launched a mail-in repair service. So if you have an old iPod like a Nano or something and you're not comfortable fixing it yourself, you can book a mail-in repair on my website. It's pretty easy to do. You just add the mail-in repair service to the checkout and then click checkout, and it'll tell you the address, and you just send it over, and then I'll fix it and send it back. So yeah, if you're interested in that, have a look. The links to that will be in the description as well. And yeah, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. See you next time. Bye.